Sorry. our live reading.
Okay, well then we can call this.
Everybody's here.
Everybody's here. It's like a full party. I guess we can call the meeting to order. Are there any modifications, additions to the agenda?
None from staff.
Okay, and I think we all received the public comment in our packets, and it doesn't look like there's anyone shown up. Is there any other public comment we need to be aware of? The consent agenda. I know that Commissioner Fox would like to have just a little discussion clarification regarding the internal bridge committee. Would that be, is that okay for us to have a discussion and then move forward on consent, or should we pull it and make it an action item, Kevin?
I would just move it down as an action item.
Or can we just have a discussion and then just
I
go forward with
yeah,
consent?
if there's just a couple of
It
questions.
sounds like there's just a couple clarifications,
sure.
but that everyone's on the same page. So
Okay.
Commissioner Fox, do you want to?
Yeah, so if you go to start with page 13.
Yeah.
And item number 6. Clarifying that port commissioners are non-voting members of internal and standing committees.
Right.
Is that by Oregon law, or is that something that the port has decided to do?
I believe that's in our governance.
I know it's in the governance, but is the governance driven by Oregon law, or is it something that the board at the time of the governance wanted to put in place?
I don't believe it's specified in the statute.
Okay, so that's something that the past board decided to do. Okay.
And if I could just jump in on that. The prior policy was silent on the matter, and then we kind of talked about what was happening in action. And everybody basically said that they don't vote. And so then we just clarified that they wanted to keep it that way.
And that from my understanding, it's the committee comes to the board with a recommendation, but it's not a vote.
Right.
Does that make sense? So there can be consensus, but not an actual standing vote.
I don't think there's anything precluding the commissioner to give their opinion. It's just,
But in that committee, it doesn't count. Is the way I read this.
That's correct.
There's no votes taken in committees, nothing. They provide recommendations to the commission, who's the only vote.
So a committee would have to say something like. The committee members recommend this or this.
Mhm.
It doesn't have to be one thing. It can be multiple things on the same topic.
I think it's Commissioner's job to relay the recommendations of the committee along with their own experience on the committee and recommendation.
Okay. And everybody's okay with that? I'm a little concerned. I'll just kind of state it.
I'll share my perspective on it, because I think there's an important difference between internal and standing committees.
Okay.
So standing committee would be like the airport committee, right? And there's 2 of us on that. And there we seek out and appoint the port commission appoints members to that from the community.
Mhm.
So those of us who are commissioners, we're going to eventually get to vote on whatever they're recommending anyway.
True.
So being there and allowing them, they actually do have votes, and they do, having been on that committee for almost last 4 years, they do make votes and, hash out things, and then they make a recommendation to pass on to us to vote. Does that make sense?
No, I get that.
Right.
I get that.
Right. The internal committees, if the port commissioners who are on those committees sort of restrain themselves to making individual recommendations, then you get out of the public meetings requirements for all of what those are.
Mhm.
So that just makes internal meetings really easy. You can organize them quickly, they're nimble, you can have them, you can discuss things, you don't have to worry about the record keeping and all that business. And then whatever commissioners are at that committee would just make individual recommendations. Like if you and I were on a bridge committee, we would come back here and say, well, I think this, and you'd say, well, I think this, and we might both think the same thing. So a little bit different reasons, I think, make sense, that we would not vote on those committees, but they're different in different cases, depending on whether it's internal versus a standing committee.
So if I stand back away for just a minute and.
Yeah.
And forget about the rules for just a second,
Yeah.
we're just talking here. When I take a look at some of the external committees that we've got,
Like the standing committees.
I'm sorry,
The
yeah,
standing
like the standing
committees, okay.
committees. And I take a look at what has actually been achieved. Not talked about, but achieved, and then since I've been on the board.
Hmm.
Not much.
Well, let me give an example because of
Okay.
the airport one, because that's the one like I know.
Yeah.
Okay, when I started on that committee, the primary concern of that committee was noise. Airport noise. Because TAC Aero had this Cub Crackers training program that one summer, and it was just constant airplane noise.
Yeah.
And so we actually put together sort of a subcommittee on the airport committee with some community members and that committee members, and had some very productive discussions about noise. And I think a lot of good did come out of that.
Actually, you're right, and I correct myself.
Yeah, there's a
That
few,
is one.
there's a
that
few other
did come
things
out that-
too, though. For instance, when I started on that committee, the Port Commission was absolutely against doing any new ground leasing at the airport. And the Port Commission was very circumspect about through the fence agreements for airport neighbors to have access to the airfield. And I really feel like it was largely the discussion and then pushing of that committee that eventually resulted in the Port Commission saying, hey, okay, we'll move ahead and really take a look at new ground leasing for vertical development to get development going at the airport. So that's another thing. A third thing would be moving the wind anemometer. Because right now it's actually in a situation where it's located is kind of dangerous. It gives inaccurate information. Sometimes people have had some dangerous landing situations, and
Excuse me, Brent. Mike Shannon's trying to get signed in.
Okay.
so I think, we on that committee pushed and pushed and pushed and said, hey, this is a serious safety issue. And now we're finally moving forward and proceeding it. And without that pushing of that committee, the rest of the Port Commission, that never would have,
We never would have.
nothing would have happened. So even though the Port Commissioners at that committee are largely observers. And they're to also to some degree to answer questions and so on. Just by letting the community members come in and kind of hash stuff out and push for what they think is important, I think has resulted in some real positive movement for the airport. And that's the committee that I know. As far as the marina or these other committees, I don't know what they've achieved, but I think there's.
I'll back off. I understand what you're saying
Yeah.
and I guess my feeling is it takes so long to get things done. And it's like, let's do this some more. Is there another way that we can do this to expedite, getting decisions made? Getting it in front of the board, making the board listen to it, evaluate it, and then make a recommendation and then giddy up, go quicker. That's where I'm coming from. So is there something we want to kick around?
Like what?
Since, well, maybe, let's take the airport.
Sure.
Okay, and I know you guys are talking about some new arrangements. With perhaps a contractor or
Staff is, yeah.
understand,
Yeah.
but that is being discussed at the airport committee.
I don't think that really is.
Not at this time, I don't think.
No,
Greg,
We're still developing the MOU. Once
Yeah.
we get into an MOU, then we'll be
then that's,
able to engage in further conversation about those
Exactly.
negotiations.
and it's to my understanding that the MOU is supposed to be here to us by hopefully our next meeting,
That's a deal.
so. Once that happens, then a lot of things will change.
I love ideas to make things move faster though, so that's like my biggest frustration, so.
Yeah.
I just, I don't have any, I don't have.
So what we, forget
Okay, well,
about the
getting
rule.
back on topic, I think we're getting off topic.
Sure.
We're talking about approving a new internal committee, and if you are okay with things, can I have a motion for to approve the consent agenda?
move to improve consent.
I'll second.
Any discussion? More further? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Sure, okay. Okay, and I'm not trying to cut you off, I mean, I think that we'll have this conversation further.
Right.
As we get
So they're brainstorming.
further into the relationship with this possible contractor, so. More to come. Okay, informational reports, bridge replacement project update. Mr. Shannon has he been able to pipe in, or is he having issues?
He is trying to join the wrong meeting. I'm trying to get-
Oh, those. Okay, well, I guess the one thing is we all have the information in our packet. Does anyone have any questions for Michael? If not, we can move on to presentations and discussion.
I'll give you a 2-minute synopsis. Progress is being made across the board. We continue to have folks from Oregon legislatures come out, visit the site. We had a great meeting, a 3 or 4 hour meeting with the Yakama Nation here on site. We think we're pushing now on the 106F agreement, and I can see the end of the tunnel there. Geotech work has been finished in the river. It's now being studied. They're doing tests back at the lab to be able to take that data, put it into a table so we can use it in the design. There is something that we may need to be talking about. We don't know yet. The lab is trying to verify what they think is going on out on the river. It could have an impact on our current bridge. So this is just kind of a heads up. We don't know enough about it yet to really talk much about it, but there is an issue there
Okay.
that we probably want to talk about. And I would guess another 2 weeks and we should be able to confirm more. So
That
everyone
might
will
be a
talk.
discussion item at our next meeting.
Yep.
Okay,
Okay, we're gearing up. We've had several meetings now with the lobbyist in DC. We're now scheduling a trip out for the grant agreement, the grant applications that we just submitted, and it looks like it'll either mid-November or sometime early October to do.
okay,
And lastly, in October, the Joint Committee of Transportation from the state of Washington is coming in for 4 hours. They're actually doing a tour of all the bridges up and down the Columbia. They're gonna have lunch here with us and Bridge of the Gods. And there'll be a whole presentation made to them and we're trying to get the entire new authority together to introduce the new governing agency to this group.
great.
So there's a lot going on the bridge.
Mhm. Okay,
Can we see the Bridge Authority logo?
Yeah, it's
Have you seen it?
it's basically very similar to that thing right there.
Yeah.
There's a little banner over the top of it. Yeah, so we tried real hard not to spend much money on it.
Okay.
Okay.
Michael, do you have anything to add or any other, I guess, any other questions from the commission for Michael, or can we move on to presentation discussion items, commission meeting schedule?
Yes, so there's a single page staff report regarding this topic. President Chapman reached out to me and asked about putting this on the agenda as a discussion item. And so the Port Commission certainly may change its meeting structure. State statute requires that the board just needs to meet once a month. The last time there was a change was in 2009, which moved it to the current time, 5 o'clock. But it appears that the commission has met twice a month on the first and third Tuesdays for many, many decades. So if there is interest in meeting only once a month, then the commission should determine which day of the month it would like to meet and whether the meeting start time is adequate. And then after that discussion, staff would be directed to bring back a report and a resolution to formalize that at the September 19th meeting. And staff is supportive of the idea, as significant time is spent preparing the meeting packets. Though you may want to take into consideration that there may be more special meetings if agreements or contracts come up that have a little bit more time sensitivity. And also, if there's going to be more committee meetings also have meeting packet prep. So just keep that in mind as well. But anyway, it's open for your discussion, and you certainly have the ability to make that adjustment, if you so decide.
And we still have the option of doing, for a special meeting, that would be one topic to do, virtual, right?
Yes, you can. I think we can. I don't know if there's been changes on virtual meetings. So yeah, if there was a special meeting to review a contract, everybody could zoom in and we could discuss it and get it approved.
So, because I kind of instigated this, I feel I should kind of declare why is, I recognize how much time staff spends preparing for meetings, and it's an entire day, number one. Secondly, I've kind of reflected back on the time spent on our meetings in reviewing what's going on with the current bridge and discussing the lobbying efforts on the new bridge. And so it seems to me that the majority of our meeting time is talking about the bridge, which is understandable because it's a massive, massive project. Now that we have this intergovernmental agency that is taking over the lobbying efforts of the new bridge, and that's not totally off our plate, but it's more of a update instead of a discussion. And now that we have this internal bridge committee that is going to be able to dive deeper into, Mark Libby's engineering reports and things that take up a significant amount of time of our meetings. It seems like this might be the time to say, I think we could maybe cram it all in a single meeting a month and do smaller special meetings that focus on singular topics. But that being said, it also makes the standing committees and the internal committees that much more important that we, regularly meet with those so that everyone's
But
checking
again,
everything.
the standing committees don't make decisions.
No, they make
It comes back to
recommendations.
this body.
Correct.
I gave it a lot of thought, and I think simplifying things is good. And I support that. When I take a look at all of the projects and stuff that the port is working on right now and getting them done, it seems like things drag out a long time, and we need to keep providing oversight onto that. With that said, I would like to kick out an option that the package that we've got, typical package, is cool for 1 month a meeting, one meeting a month. But maybe you take a second meeting and limit it to an hour. and you have a special topic, one special topic for that meeting that allows us as an organization to talk back and forth about that one at a little bit of depth. The issue that I have here is a lot of what we're doing, we just kind of scratch the surface, make a decision and move on. And I'm wondering if it wouldn't be worthwhile taking a little bit more time to get the report from one of the committees, but really chew on it a little bit, talk back and forth. One meeting a month and limit it again to 1 hour. And when we don't have a special topic, don't have a meeting. But try and force, when you take a look at what we've got facing us from a point of view of the port, not the new bridge. Because there's another entity now that's doing that. But we've got the old bridge, we've got a communication issue that we want to resolve, we've got lot 1 that we're trying to develop, we've got the airport plan that we're trying to develop, we've got Odell, what are we going to do with that up there? I think there's a number of discussions that if we had a little bit more time, we could get into in depth, but one, not 2 or 3 or 4. So that's an alternate to this. And for that particular topic, we ought to have a single package, very focused in it. For the most part, it should be coming out of the various committees. But don't try and cram it into a, 3 or 4 minute discussion. Give it some time to talk about.
So is your suggestion that we would go with a single regularly scheduled meeting once a month on a set day and then be prepared to do, boom, a special meeting when needed?
Well, but I think there's enough on the plate now that I think in very short order, we could probably identify the 5 or 6 issues right now that'll take another 5 or 6 meetings. And get them scheduled out. That may take 2 months, 3 months. And then as we go, as we evolve, we add to, or if we decide that, hey, everything's fine, don't have them, stop. But my sense is there's a lot of stuff out there that we could probably benefit from spending a little bit of time on it, and then as a group, trying to decide what kind of direction do we want to give to the port.
Let me offer a compromise there, both.
Yeah.
I see where you're going, and I don't disagree that we don't want to let things go. And not talk about them, and then things have a chance to get behind or off course. Right. Yeah, I was here before the bridge, just. I was here during when the decision was made, I'm gonna be here after. So we're Jen, so we're Daryl. We were very good 6-7 years ago at, before we even were talking about bridge at all, making these meetings tag 4+ hours a night. Then the bridge came along, we were here. So when I became president, I sort of put my foot down on meeting time, just out of respect for staff, and we don't need to ramble on all night long about everything else. So we got pretty efficient, and the commission works really well together. We have for several years. We're doing a good job of being efficient, getting through things, and getting out of here in a couple of hours while accomplishing some good work. So do I think we could do the needed business for the month in one 3 to 4 hour meeting once a month as opposed to 2 2-hour meetings? Yeah, with the needed planning sessions, special meetings, whatever. Maybe a compromise would be having that single plan meeting plus anything that we need to add, but in each of those monthly meetings, we receive a 10-minute, it doesn't matter, update on Lower Handle Mill, on lot 1, on this. Where are we? What's progress? And we tied into last meeting, what's going on, and each of those staff members is responsible for a report, 10 minutes, whatever it is. And at the end of that report, okay, sounds like we're on track, or a little bit of discussion, or we need to have a special meeting.
Yeah.
Then we don't have a set one, but we say, okay, we need to plan one now. So let's
And
get
I'm
it
okay
on
with
the
that.
calendar.
I think that's a great compromise in that. If we take the list of all of the key projects that are underway right now. That we as a governing body ought to be looking at them once a month.
Mhm.
Now, some of them go real fast because they're on target and things are moving fine. But for those that aren't, we still need to say, wait a minute, what's going on? Where do you need help? What's the next step? That's part of our.
And we'll rely then on the commissioner that's most tight, closely tied to that particular airport, waterfront, whatever. Hey, we need, okay, here's the we need to have a little talk about this, or, we need to refocus, so perhaps then we can schedule a meeting.
Mhm.
And then schedule those special meetings.
So I agree with both of you. I think you're both saying equally the same thing. I have a question. What would be easier for staff? Would it be easier to stay with our set meetings? And knowing that we'll focus on the first meeting being the meat and potatoes. And at the first meeting, then we can say, well, we don't need the second meeting in the month, let's cancel it. Or is it better to say we only have one meeting a month? But sometimes we call a special session.
I think every meeting is gonna take some prep.
Right.
So those meetings where there's a lot of items, there's gonna be more prep. If it's a single item, depending on the materials that you'd like presented, it may take less prep.
No, I want to argue with you on that one. I think if we made this section of the meeting that we're going through. The work that is planned, not getting done, what are the problems? The tools that you bring in here should be exactly the same tools that you're using day to day. So that should be no extra work on your part. If it is, that tells me something right there.
Well, what I said was if it's just a singular meeting, there's gonna be less prep. If there's a single item,
I don't know if I agree with that, but yeah. I mean, if the second meeting was dedicated solely to going through the list of the projects.
Yeah.
Then whether you do it for the first meeting or the second meeting, it's still the same.
yeah,
But what I would offer to you. Is what we don't want is something special. For this presentation, we want you to bring in your tools that you're using every day. And explain to us what's going on. And where can we help you when you've got a problem? And talk through the issue.
so right now we're doing the schedules. And that I think has been embraced for the most part by staff. And so I would say that would be coming to you. What other tools are you thinking about?
I feel like we're
that's the
talking
start.
about three different things, the main meeting. And then project updates and helping projects along, and then also. Timely things that pop up that we need to take care of in special meetings. So it sounds like. We definitely need to have at least one scheduled meeting. And then a second for projects, and then special meetings on a as needed basis.
Well,
That seems
That's
like a
not, that's
lot.
not all
Seems
I
like
was saying,
a
a
lot.
second meeting for project, no, that's not
No,
what I said.
but it
No.
seems to me that the way that you have started emailing project updates and the spreadsheet on your weeklies. That should allow us to say, hey, there's a red flag, we need to call a special meeting,
Yeah,
or things look like they're going on track. And because you guys are just sharing your project updates, I find those very helpful.
Get the
and-
schedules in this packet.
Yeah. Mhm.
Great.
Yeah.
Let me repeat, we have our one meeting, we get our 10-minute report from Greg on X. Thank you, sounds like it's going well. If for some reason this commission says, we need to talk, schedule a meeting. Otherwise, and I guess my only question is, are there any public meeting law problems with either canceling a scheduled meeting or scheduling one? I know you can schedule, you just have to give notice,
We
but
need 48 hours.
Canceling,
notice
no
to
issues?
Schedule, but
is there-
canceling.
doesn't matter either way, okay.
So maybe the easiest thing is to keep 2 meetings on the books, and then we just all
Cancel one.
agree our first meeting of the month is our meat and potatoes, and we get detailed reports of whatever main project you guys are working on. The project updates get emailed to us on a regular basis, which is awesome. And then we can just say, we don't need a second one, and staff can kind of say,
And then we still have the flexibility of throwing in a special meeting
Yeah.
if we need to.
yeah,
We can always do
Or
that.
coming out of the committees, if there's something that's, hey, we ought to be bringing to the party. That committee can suggest that for that second meeting.
That's fine. I want more, I think once a month. Getting a solid update. I don't care if nothing's happened. I wanna know why or.
Yeah.
Good or bad. So yeah, I'm on that.
that's
May
great,
staff ask a logistical question?
of course.
When would the committee or the commission decide if that second meeting is not necessary? Because there's a lot of buildup and preparations for that second meeting. And if it's decided, if it's prepared for ahead of time, it's
At the first meeting,
First meeting.
at the first meeting.
yeah,
Yeah, I think it'll make that a topic on the first meeting.
Yeah.
Just at the end, almost when it's directives to staff.
yeah,
Are we having a second meeting or not?
I think that's a great,
And what are the topics?
And what will the
Yeah.
topics of staff to prepare? And what do we want to see?
Yeah. that sound good? And then we don't have to do a statute and a resolution and all that, we just keep it
Yes, I
status
guess,
quo.
the question is for a regular meeting, the commission can make it whatever they want the regular meeting to consist of.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, then there wouldn't be a change.
Okay,
Just a recommendation.
Yeah.
To make it the second Tuesday of the month instead of the first, because that would enable you to approve the legal bill, we'd be able to receive that. And it avoids the Memorial Day and July
Yep.
4th holidays that we're always rescheduling, and also I think. Another holiday just kind of, we usually bump it to the second Tuesday instead of the first, so
so the
If you
second
wanna-
and the fourth,
have the second and the fourth, and the fourth be
Uh,
maybe the extra.
the extra,
Maybe meeting.
So let me ask you a question about that. Let's say that. In the big meeting, one of the standing items ought to be, where are we against the budget? Do we have a problem in the yearly budget? And you want it to be where you've got the actuals for the previous month. You've had time to roll them into your system. So is it better to have the main meeting the third week or the first week? And I would think it's probably the third week if you want the actuals rolled into your books.
And that all depends on where the days fall, because the second Tuesday of the month could be the 8th. And so that would be a pretty tight time to close the prior month and get reports out. What I could do, and this is perfectly acceptable, is just email out the reports by the 15th of the month to you, and they wouldn't necessarily be presented at a meeting, but you would have the information by the 15th of the month.
Could be part of that Friday email.
Yeah.
My recommendation is for at least a couple of months. I would like to hear from you. How to read the new reports and your interpretation and your staff's interpretation of what it's telling us. You know, what action should we be taking based on what we're seeing on the reports?
so then are you like, if we kept the meetings the same, but had like the meat and potatoes meeting the third
That's what I'm thinking.
Tuesday. And if we need to have a second meeting the first Tuesday, so we're not changing anything, it's just,
I don't care, but if it helps staff prepare better.
And that would
Other
be,
than that, I don't care.
oh, sorry. That would also be easier for the legal bills also, because
Okay.
then you would. Yeah, that is easier actually for wrapping up all the information from the prior month and all those things that come in like the first week or two of the next month.
okay.
So the main meeting would be the third
Third
Tuesday of the month, or yeah, third
Yeah,
Tuesday. of the
that's,
month.
well, that's what you suggested.
Yeah.
That, I mean, that would work well for, at least from the finance department. I'm not speaking on behalf of all staff, but
I think for lease payment tracking too, by the.
Uh-huh.
by the
Yeah,
third Tuesday
yeah,
of
the
month,
third,
you know,
yes.
there's-
Can staff make one more comment, if you please? As the operational component of the port and as the policy setting component of the port, if ever there is an operational issue, that would be escalated to the commission for consideration for an emergency session.
Of course.
That should in and of itself be theoretically enough to insinuate if there's a need for a second meeting, then that would be cycled up from staff.
Mhm.
The ability to track progress, obviously, it can be dictated that, oh, there's an issue here. Is there a policy decision that needs to be decided upon? Give staff direction. Let's all meet. Having a secondary meeting just to have a secondary meeting in the holding seems like it gets a little convoluted with regard to scheduling. As opposed to having one scheduled meeting a month and the ability to have an emergency meeting at any given time, whether staff directs it up or commission directs it down.
We've got full circle.
Simplification, and staff appreciates the consideration for a 1 month, one meeting a month, because it allows time for work to get done rather than,
Preparation. for
as
meetings.
Kevin alluded to, even in a committee meeting, there's still an agenda, there's still work to present, and even if we were to bring a single subject item, we would still have to put it into Cliff Notes, so that way the commission could absorb what staff is working on day to day, without getting lost in the minutia.
Okay.
So here's a question for you more experienced parliamentarians that have been doing this for a little while. Do we have to have staff make a report and resolution, or can we just decide right here to have our primary meeting the third Tuesday of every month, and then
That's it.
at that meeting, make a decision if we want to have a meeting the following Tuesday?
Both, you can do this, we can just do the second one, say that's what we're doing. I do believe there'll have to be a change in our governance.
Mhm.
That will need a signature on a resolution, so probably have to pass it, but you can just say that's what we're doing.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
I think the governance policy says 48 hours, that whatever the,
That's state law.
Yeah.
right, and it's also in the governance is,
Yeah.
so we just theoretically, we could just make a motion, it just needs to be out and about for 48 hours. Resolution is just a little bit easier for tracking purposes.
Okay.
But we don't have to wait to the next meeting to do the resolution.
That's
We
what I'm
can-
saying.
We can do it right now and say,
Well,
We can make a motion
I
right
think
now.
I guess you could go, well, but it hasn't been in the packet.
What we need to do is
I don't know.
advertise, we need to advertise it in the packet, and it needs to be then voted on and then, I believe, signed, but I don't know if we can. We can instruct staff to make that motion or that.
You know, what if we
Be a
just-
lawyer kicking
Why
over
don't,
there.
the commission can just simply say that this is what we're going to do. We're gonna have 2 meetings, continue to keep a first and third regular meeting. After the meeting on the third week of the month. Just cancel the first meeting of the month if you need to. Because you've canceled you've gone one
Around
meeting.
again.
That's
Yeah.
that's not what Commissioner just said.
No, what he's saying is, what's the motion? Can we just adopt it tonight? That's what he was asking.
That's her.
And I thought it was 40, you have to have the motion out in public for 48 hours first.
Technically, the topic is noticed, and we are allowed by statute to add items. We could make the motion today and ratify it with a written document next week.
Right. Yes.
I like the way you said it the first time, so we should-
Just one last thought, and that is on the topic of transparency and public access.
Mhm.
And maybe this could bleed into our next discussion topic, but when we do move from 2 to generally 1 meeting a month, that's less chance for the public to speak to you directly. So we might want to think about other ways that people could maybe have coffee with Christie and, some other sort of public access opportunities to make sure that folks who want to speak directly to their electeds have the ability to do that. And not have to wait a month before they can talk to you.
Well, I think that hammers the
Yeah. there you go.
Oh, man.
Just
Beers with
something to
Ben.
think about.
It seems like, I mean, just from my time here, the amount of public interaction, I think one meeting a month seems
Be
adequate.
Okay,
I do think having 2 meetings scheduled and then regularly canceling it would be more confusing than
Yeah.
having one a month.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, well, and if we need
Although
to.
coffee with Christie's.
Quiet,
second
you know,
meeting.
seriously.
Or beer with Ben.
I know, that's what I said.
Chris, you already thought of that one. Let's do it.
Yeah.
What did we think of this last year?
I know. I mean, if we need more public
Tacos and
involvement, I
tortas.
mean, all of our all of our emails are listed on the website, and I do get, you know, emails directly from citizens, and I respond to every single one of them. But if people feel like there needs to be more public involvement, we can always, that's easy to add. Okay.
Why
So,
don't we just keep going like we are? The next meeting, which would be the equivalent third week of the month, right? Or am I getting my calendars off?
That's right, that's right.
Okay, and we run that third meeting like we want to. Skinny down, but focused. And you bring in the status of each of the projects. Now you've got it on your little chart.
Yeah.
But we ought to talk about it for a few minutes.
no. I mean, I think I agree that if we are constantly canceling meetings, that's gonna be really confusing to the public. So I think we need to decide, do we wanna try this? I mean, resolutions can always be unresolved, so appeal, whatever, and so I think we should, you know, if we wanted, I think. For staff and for transparency and for everything, I think we should either go for it and try it out and see if it works. And if we find that it doesn't, then we pivot and we adjust. But it also is going to be a commitment of all commissioners to make sure, you know, because one of the things that I've seen in the past is it's really easy to cancel the marina meeting. Or the airport meeting, or the, you know, and so it's gonna be important for commissioners to commit to saying, I'm on these committees and I'm gonna show up. So that those things are, you know, staying in the communications for this one big meeting a month. And then we'd be happy with calling special meetings whenever we need them.
I feel like I'm gonna get more information that way. If I get not a quarterly financial update, but no, a monthly one. I feel like I'm gonna get more information than I do now and more opportunity to talk about it than I do today. And I like that. Even if it's just in 15-minute increments once a month, I like that. And if we need that, we can call a second meeting every single month if we feel like it. Nothing stopping. I'm fine with it.
I'd really like to make a motion, and then, of course, there's always opportunities for discussion after a motion. And the motion I'd like to make is to move to have a single meeting the third Tuesday at 5 p.m. every month, and at that meeting, decide if we would like to have a meeting on the subsequent Tuesday, but just have one scheduled meeting on the books, which is the third Tuesday of the month.
I'll
That's my
second
motion.
that.
A little bit of discussion on that.
Sure.
I like that idea.
Yes.
But I think we need to have a standard. In the agenda of stuff that we want to see once a month. So it's not just a consent agenda, throw whatever you want to on there kind of a thing.
Right.
But there ought to be a standard where we go through each of the projects. We get a report out from each of the committees. You know, standing committees and special topics and that kind of stuff.
I agree with that. I like
And
that.
including the financials.
So what I'd like
But I
to,
don't know that it needs to be part of the motion.
no, it doesn't need to be a part of the motion, and so what I would
Yeah.
suggest is. Everyone think about what they would like to have presented at every meeting and email it to me, and I will share it with Kat.
I would just change the motion to not say that the special meeting has to be on the subsequent Tuesday.
Oh, to let it be,
Whatever we decide.
whatever. Okay. So amended.
I'm fine with that.
Me too.
Okay.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, pass. And so at the next meeting, we'll have that resolution drafted.
Absolutely.
Okay, and I will get you everyone's comments on what they would like to make sure is included in the monthly meeting.
And I'm assuming that those will be subsets of the discussion items.
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay, so when is the next meeting?
the third Tuesday of the month.
Okay, thank you.
No
I need
changes.
that meeting.
Yeah.
Can you ask if our break can be the ED report brought forward, or does it need to be memos?
Yeah, I'll follow up on that.
We'll figure that out.
Yeah.
Okay, public relations service scope of work discussion. Genevieve.
So, we are, for a long time, the multiple commissions have discussed the possibility of contracting with a public relations firm to add to staff capacity on public communications. And I think particularly in the past year, there's been so many significant changes. It's a great time to really think about the whole suite of projects that could be wrapped into that contract. And so we'd like to issue an RFP in the next 4 weeks if possible. And we wanted to have a discussion, have you discuss amongst yourself what items you would like included in that scope. This is not something that's in this year's budget, but we can try to make room for it, Debbie assures me. So we'd like to know how much you'd like to spend and what are the deliverables and timeline that you'd like to see on something like that.
I'm a little more interested in what, on this one, staff thinks. What areas staff needs help, and what areas staff thinks that we could do, because.
Right.
I don't think the Board of Ed Rivers should be spending a whole lot of money in PR for the new bridge project in any way. So
I don't-
where is staff thinking?
I don't think we should be spending anything on the new bridge as far as PR. They've already got a PR system up
Right.
and running.
Right.
You know,
Yeah, this, keep going.
yeah, so, I think just some ideas that I've had is one. We had an economic impact study that was done 10 years ago showing what jobs are supported here at the port. I think something like that would be very valuable, including a survey to find out how many of our workers are from where they live. I think that would be a very helpful item. I think doing something that promotes and really showcases the importance and the popularity of the waterfront and really showing the public, little public interest stories, if you will, that promotes either our tenants, our customers, and our employees, so that we can kind of put a face to the port. I think rebranding, I think there's been a lot of consternation about the anchor and the apple and the gear. And so here we are on the precipice of not having a bridge anymore. What's the new port? How should it be better branded? Another thing is the centennial celebration. December 6th of next year is the 100th anniversary of the bridge. Is there an opportunity where we could promote a day on December 6th where for 2 hours, people can come and walk on the bridge, bike on the bridge, bring their dog on the bridge, and you do some things that really promote the history of the current bridge. And so, I mean, I think those are some of the things that I've been seeing. And of course, there's just not enough time for Jen when she's doing everything else on these social media needs. And so having somebody that's just there that can really quickly do social media pings when there's a need to have a single lane or full lane closure, or there's an accident or something even more important, that we've got somebody that can do that without a lot of struggle. So that's my 2 bits. So
Well, the real-time stuff is probably better kept in staff because we have the direct access to the real-time
Sure.
stuff. So really what I think multiple commissions have wanted to do is address those perennial questions like, where did all the money go? What has it done? What has this unique business model of a local community owning its own transportation infrastructure done for this community? And where are we going now? What is going to happen to the port with the new bridge? And what are these changes that we're making and how are they affecting people? Why is our property tax rate so low? And what is that doing now that we're going through this major change in our business model? And what has to happen to keep the parks going? What is the role of the port in the community? And what has it brought to the community since 1933? Sort of those longer questions. And it's always been sort of, in my mind, sort of a ethical question of how much in public funds should you expend in order to, one, inform the public, which I think should be, robust, but 2, also sort of change the minds, which I think you have to be conservative about. Nobody wants you to spend a toll dollar to convince them
that the tolling is good. So you have to be conservative on the budget side of those things, because is it a proper expenditure of public funds to try to change minds? Probably not. But to try to better inform those minds, probably yes. And so those are deep dive questions. And I think Kevin's absolutely right. If we could have a 10-year update to the economic impact study that talks about jobs created from the economic development projects, and even the parks, the port-owned parks. What jobs have been created both directly and indirectly in the recreational industry here by the Port of Hood River's investment? What sort of jobs have been created by the, purchases of buildings and the development of land? Those sorts of things are important. Not everybody's going to care, not everybody's going to listen, but it's a good time to talk about those things. And I think Kevin's absolutely right. It's a 100-year birthday of the bridge, and it would be a great time to say, well, what has local ownership and local governance, which will continue with the new bridge, done? It's different than the state-owned bridge. And so that's a few things. But there also is just simply a quarterly newsletter. I need help with that. It takes a ton of time. And I really love the idea of highlighting our tenants and providing each of those businesses a little extra marketing boost by a focus from their landlord, essentially, but also their business partner, the port, through our channels. And so there's lots of different things we can do. Kevin's talking about the anchor. I'm done with our logo. I don't think it applies to who the port is anymore. And I think the main key message is it's a new port. And you can deliver that message in a lot of different ways. And the fact that it's a new port, there's 100 different topics under that directly impact people's lives on both sides of the river. And folks want to know what it means. So, all the way from helping out with sort of project updates and calls for community input and things like that, to a rebranding of the logo, to really explaining the deep dive questions that are just something you cannot answer in a social media post or an answer to a comment on Facebook. I mean, you can't provide enough information through those channels. It's really something that has to be developed with infographics and visuals and video production, those sorts of things. So it's a balance. Like I said, we have to be conservative on the budget, but I really do want to have your wish list before I finish up the scope.
Do I remember correctly, there was a line item in the budget for something like this that we looked at a few months back? Is there a placeholder in the budget that said PR?
Not for PR.
There's our communications.
There is whatever was in your
Advertising budget.
Yeah, there's advertising, there is a line item for the newsletter, but that's actually the production of the newsletter. Jen's still doing all the work.
So how much do we
It's
think?
about
And if we want- oh, yeah,
25,000.
Jim, we wanted 25,000, okay, fine. If we say, yeah, we want to do all that, how much does that cost?
Probably 35 or 45
So twice what we have in the budget, call it 50 grand over the course of probably 2 years, or is that per year?
per year.
My last-
But see, that's up to you. I mean, it's,
I'm just thinking money and value, and I don't disagree that it's necessary, but no bridge tolls, obviously. So how does it also benefit our rental? Everything I'm thinking about is how do we make money? How does this help us make money also, not just
as
promote
we
us?
move to
but-
June 30, 2026.
Yeah,
All
but
of
just
those
let
things
me,
that come from
where I'm
that.
thinking, this is,
Yeah.
and I agree, we need to start, but we need to be promoting, obviously, development properties, what we're doing, office, blah, 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 all of it. While not spending money, obviously in one spot, so my first thought is. The one place that we can't take money out of, that airport, could we also, would it be legal, and this is a question we might not know the answer to. Would it be legal for airport revenue that we're really trying to get into the black to use some of that on PR if the airport is included in this campaign? Can we then use some of those funds?
I don't
To help
know
fund the
answer
PR.
to that. I do
I don't
not.
know if the
That's a question
Try to
I
get that.
would love to answer because I don't know, but that might be one way to. Actually use some of that money to benefit the entire port district and also promote the airport.
Mhm.
It's an FAA construction.
One thing also
Operations.
for the Parks and Rec. If we were able to do some promotional work with our Parks and Rec. The district is actually going out for a series of funding measures that includes a $900,000 placeholder for other agency projects. And so if the port is using this firm to develop promotional materials highlighting our parks and our waterfront, that just is a way to leverage the work that the district, Parks and Rec District, is going to be doing and making the place, hey, there's a lot of people here at the Port of Hood Rivers waterfront. This is where some of that money should be directed. It's really showing, hey, this is going to be a wonderful place for some of those funds to be placed when tolls go away.
I guess my point is, then I'll shut up. I wanna know where the money's gonna come from before I say yes or no. I agree with the need. I understand over the next few years. I get it. And I agree. I wanna know where the money's gonna come from specifically.
Let me give you some insight, what's happening on the replacement bridge. Lessons learned there is that if you bring a company on, a PR company, they will spend money. And you can either let them run amok or you control them. So what we decided on the new bridge is that we want to be in control of the message. So we need to think through, in this particular case, what are we trying to do with this and have some themes? You have to have some kind of an organization that is going to put these themes together to give to your PR. Otherwise, they'll create all kinds of stuff and spend lots of money, a lot of money, if you don't keep control of it. So my question to you would be, while I agree that we need some help here, who's going to make the decision and what's the list that we want their help on? If we don't know what that list is, how can we go out for bid for that? So,
Right, and that's kind of what this discussion is about, is
Right.
building that list. I wanted to get a wish, I have my wish list, and I wanted to get your wish list too, and make sure that I've got that all covered. And then we'll talk, and then you'll be approving a scope of work at the next meeting.
Yeah.
With deliverables.
Would it be beneficial if, I was just thinking back to our last discussion, we need to email Christie those topics that we are interested in seeing on a monthly meeting? I didn't come prepared to know exactly, but put it in some thought. I bet I could come up with 3 or 4 things that I think would be really important. Could we compile them and I'll send them to Jen or something and then come back with a proposal like, this is what we want to go out with. Let's narrow it down if we need to our top 5 or 10 and have that discussion together and then go out with an RFP if we decide to after that.
So, and I personally think that's a good idea.
Mhm.
But before you go out for an RFP, I believe we need to think through. How are we gonna mature those concepts, those ideas? That we then have a mechanism to give to the PR group to go do their wonderful things with.
Isn't that their job to do for us?
No. I mean,
It depends upon
you
the
can do
PR
it that
firm.
way, but what you want them to do is, hey, we want to do this. They bring some ideas in, but we're making the decisions. They are not.
Mhm.
Or you lose control of it. So I guess what I'm after is as we come up with these 5, we need to make sure that we're going to be ready to sit down and say, okay, here's the thoughts that we really have to make it go. Get this outfit to come in. We have a 2-way discussion. And then you guys turn them loose to go do it. It's like, hey, give me a book. There'll be lots of
Yeah, I
different.
completely agree, especially with the key messaging. You have to be very detailed in exactly what's embedded under each of those. And you can't just give them the top level stuff. And along with this, I was also asking if the commission would consider doing an update to this report, which is the 2013 report. And if we did a 10-year update, that would encompass the COVID impacts and the COVID recovery impacts. And it would give, one of the things I worry about with entering into a contract with a PR firm is that we're not properly equipped with neutral third-party verifiable data to give to them on the statements that we want to make, specifically about job creation, economic impact. That shouldn't be coming from the top of our heads. That should be something
an economist figures out, and we are relaying these statistics and data to the PR firm to include in the report. So it's not subjective, it's totally objective.
So let me challenge that just a little bit. And I understand if we kept the bridge going and we got revenue coming in and we're gonna continue to do that kind of a machine, we're developing, jobs and whatnot. Well, with this bridge going away, what does our future port look like? As far as economic development, is that gonna be one of our high points, is continue economic development? Or are we morphing into something else? That's what we need, I think, this communication group or the PR group to help us fashion the message out to the community. If that's the case, we're looking out in the future, capturing a bunch of data, what happened in the past. Well, it's kind of nice to know, but so what?
Well, I think,
That's my challenge.
I
and
think people want that question
I
answered.
think that the two things, I agree that we need to decide what we're gonna do as a port moving forward. And it might not, our number one value and goal might not be economic development anymore, because we can't do that very well anymore, but I do think that a lot of people, what I hear in the community the most, what did you do with all the money? Why do you have buildings? Why do you have commercial leases? You're essentially competing with the public. And so I do think that part of whatever it is that we start to message to the community, I do think that that would be a good thing. And I think the timing is so perfect with this 100-year coming up. It's where have we been? What have we done? And then where are we going? And I think the where are we going part is where we can start to say, we're changing our look, we're changing our logo, we're pivoting, but this is our history. And it can all lead up to this centennial celebration.
And
Not sure about dogs on the bridge.
Yeah.
No
No
dogs
dogs.
on the bridge.
If the community is losing its only economic development agency, that needs to be explained.
Right,
And the role of the port as economic development, the economic development agency since 1933, that has to be explained. So what is here that wouldn't have been here without a port? The entire waterfront.
right.
And, so the Port of the Dalles, the Port of Cascade Locks will continue to exist and will continue to do their, maybe it's a one-on-one on what happened locally for economic development with this bridge. And are we losing that? Are we no longer going to have an economic development agency? Or should that role be taken over by the county? Or, who's going to do economic development around here if it's not us? So
How much, a little bit off, how much would this study cost?
when they did it in 2013, I think the contract was, around $20,000.
So it's probably 50 now.
30. Yeah. And it included interviews with all of our tenant businesses and they did some in-plan, formulas, but they also did some direct and indirect effects, but
Maybe worth investigating, see how much it would be.
Yeah, for sure.
I've got an idea. It'll give us all a little time to do what both staff and commission needs to do. We need a minute to think about those things and maybe staff needs a minute to figure out how much this is all gonna cost, because
yeah,
study 20 grand, 50 grand. Okay, you're talking about $125,000 over 2 years to do everything. Thereabouts, we've got 25-ish already in the budget. Where's the other, what are the ideas that the other 100 could come from?
and is.
Well, I can come up with 3 or 4 ideas. Is that possible? I don't know. Well, just give us some time to find out. Bring us a proposal how you want to fund it. And call it
Sort of
125
a
grand.
cost benefit.
Yeah, call it
analysis,
120, call it 125 grand,
What's
but
the need, what's the want type
I
stuff.
don't care about that. I care about how we're to fund it. Bring us a proposal to how to fund a $125,000 PR campaign that includes everything we've talked about.
I mean, this also seems like, as far as the where are we going, this could be right up Visit Hood Rivers Alley
A lot of it would be.
on some of their grant funding sources in Travel Oregon. Because this is, how do we continue to bring people from the outside to enjoy all of the wonderful things the port has done? And so, yeah, so where can we find these monies to help us do all of the things that we want to do? And I think Travel Oregon and Visit Head River would be a great spot to start.
There's monies in that budget. I'm saying this knowing that there's monies in those budgets, perhaps we elected to keep. Sending one direction over the last few years that perhaps we elect to put. To use internally, maybe for a few years moving forward, but. We don't, that's not for discussion for tonight.
Right.
And who knows, this might be a 3-year exercise. You know, maybe after 3 years, maybe it kind of quiets down a little bit and pull it back a little bit.
Yes.
I might add that depending on the funding source, the grant source, Travel Oregon versus Business Oregon, it would help staff significantly if the commission answers that existential question of what the board's going to exist as moving forward, whether we're going to be an economic driver or recreational district. That changes the game as far as what PR aspect goes out on the street and so there's a little bit of guidance from the commission that staff could benefit from as they pursue this.
And it's interesting because we were talked at our staff meeting today about fall planning. If you remember, we had fall planning December, well, it was November 15th of last year. And the number one theme from that November 15 work session was one, consensus that the port should continue to exist after the new bridge is operational. So one of the things that would make sense is to figure out when there's a good time for fall planning, maybe late October, early November, to review this document and do a refresh.
Would suggest we do it earlier than later, because I think we've matured since last year. And it's probably time to step back and what do we really want to be 3 years from now, 5 years from now?
Yeah, and I think we talked
Yeah.
about that. I think we can probably put some materials together
And the key thing about that, how can we get this communication or PR group going if we can't answer that question ourselves?
So maybe if I could suggest, I think it would be good for everyone to really take some time and think about what you personally think the port's gonna be after the bridge. And email me some thoughts or email them directly to Genevieve, and we need to probably continue this conversation at our next meeting. With more definitive answers, but I do think the big question is what, you know, if you look at the port website and we have 5 goals and it's economic. And it's, you know, recreation, are those still our goals? And then from there, you know, where have we been and where are we gonna go? Does that work for everyone? Heather?
Yeah, I would just. I think the communication on what we've done, we and FTR has done, being pointed out, is super important also, and I think. PR and where we're going isn't as important as the communication and transparency and. Correcting misinformation. Not to change people's minds but
Just educate.
to educate, and then our image will be improved just through education.
Yeah,
So I think where we're going, it's like a secondary.
well, that was,
issue
and that's
with
more
PR.
of an internal issue
Yeah,
of where are we going. I think that the PR aspect is.
Yeah.
Where have we been? What have we done? How did we spend the money?
No, well, did I hear you right? I checked out for a second there.
Okay.
Full disclosure. The
You're gonna
PR
be quoted
is
in the
not-
paper for that.
The PR is not just where we are today and how we got to where we are today, but it's just as important, if not more important, where are we going?
Well, I think that first we need to figure that out. I think a bigger piece of what I agree with Jen is the first thing we need to start doing now is educating people of where have we been and what have we done with money. And why are we a port and what is our existence? And then moving forward, like Kevin said, this is probably a 3-year project. So we can slowly. We can slowly
No, I understand.
decide where we want to go.
Do we have the right level of staff support to answer that first question? Where did the money go?
We'll need help. Yeah, we'll need help.
And I think there's some ways to go about doing that. So we, at one of my prior stops for their centennial anniversary, they actually had a documentary produced. And this documentarian went into the archives. In this case, it would probably be studying the diamond building conversions. And having somebody that's not part of staff that's actually going in and doing that research and pulling it forward.
Okay, so if that's a real question that we've got to answer. Instead of talking right now about PR, we ought to be talking about, okay, what resources do you need to be able to answer that question? Then you bring the PR guys in to help you
Disseminate.
disseminate it.
Yeah.
So if that's a really important question, and I think it is, how are we gonna go get that? So if you don't know tonight, maybe that's something that ought to come together on the next meeting.
So can I get consensus from the commission that this is an important item that we want to keep talking about and want to move forward with?
You're referring specifically to PR,
PR, historical things.
vision for the future.
Vision
all
for the
this.
future.
Yeah, I think it's important. I definitely want to think about it some more.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
Does that help?
A lot.
Okay.
Thank you, thank you.
you guys pitched it really hard.
Thanks for
It was a
staying
good sell. So,
Okay, well, if that's all, then we'll move forward to the executive director report, Mr. Greenwood.
Yeah, so I won't repeat anything that's in the written packet, but just do want to touch on the toll increase that took place on Friday, early morning. It sounds like we went through, we were very concerned about quarters. Quarters was kind of the theme of the day. In that it went basically through 100 quarters, $100 worth of quarters in those first 3 days. We didn't receive a whole lot of quarters back
$100 each day.
each day. It was $300 for the whole weekend. So quarter management is going to be a running theme. So don't be surprised if you hear jokes or people talking about quarters under their breath, because that is kind of
We should have raised it a buck.
Yes.
there was some thoughts about that. So I don't know if you have any other previews or thoughts about how the toll.
No, but you're exactly right about the quarters, because Marcella had went and got $500 worth of quarters, and then we started talking about, I said, well, how much money do you have? And she goes, well, there's $400 sitting in the safe at Bill's. And I said, take it and go get $404 worth of quarters, because it was the Labor Day weekend. Plus we had to get through today too, until the bank would open. But yeah, that was kind of overkill, but that's okay, because we'll use them. We're going through about $100 a quarter per day. I did some really quick back of the napkin type, just kind of looking. It's difficult to compare one day to another or 1 year to another, because I'm trying to think of all the different circumstances and that. But it is interesting that more people are using BreezeBuy now. It's up to about 80% of summer crossings. And so in the winter, that'll even be a higher percent. So when we look at other tolling agencies, we're pretty much tapped out on BreezeBuy. Pretty much everybody that's going to have a BreezeBuy account probably has one. And obviously we'll continue to get new ones, but we'll continue to close old ones and things like that. So we're doing really, really well. Also, credit card use is way up. And with the toll increase, I noticed even just from Thursday to Friday, it bumped up quite a bit. I think the higher the tolls go, the more likely somebody is just to pull out a credit card. It's like, I know me personally, if it's a buck or two, I'll hand them cash. If it's over a couple of bucks, a lot of times it's a credit card for me.
Are we eating a 3% fee on that? I
We
forget.
are, yes, yeah. And the fee, it depends, but it's probably about 2.5%, but yeah, we're subsidizing that. And so that, I think that shows that people are going to more electronic whatever they can do electronically, credit cards, online, whatever. So I'll try, in a month to have, we'll have a full month. We can compare the month of September of this year to the month of September a year ago and have some better statistics and analysis.
So it's very interesting. We got the signs up. So, so far, so good there. The wire ropes arrived today. So if you're interested in taking a look at these, they're in the garage in the back of this building. So it's temperature controlled. It's not out in the unheated facility. So they look great.
They're gonna go out on the bridge,
They are. But until they go out on the bridge, we want to keep them very, very
Well,
comfortable.
don't even sound like they're, they have to be.
Like eggs, like.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah. Well, they're almost as expensive as a family building, so. And then the south lift span gearbox has been repaired, and then that will be replaced during the single lane closure tomorrow morning. So that will be taking place. And then I think, we talked a little bit about fall planning and. Yeah, go ahead.
So right there.
Yeah.
Are we gonna put out a notice that the gearbox is operational again? And we made kind of a deal that, hey, the gearbox broke down, we gotta take it out, shut the lift down. We ought to be taking credit PR wise. Yep, we got her back in there and it's working. Good news.
Yeah, absolutely. We can certainly do that.
Yeah.
Let's make sure it works first.
We just say the other gearbox failed.
Don't say that, please. But anyway, so yeah, absolutely. I think once we do it, I'm sure they'll be doing a test check at the appropriate time, and then we'll send that out. But great conversation on the public relations, and we'll try to tie that in with the fall planning and bring some good things for you there to consider. But other than that, unless you have any other questions in the packet, that's all I have.
Okay, Commissioner Committee reports. Did anyone attend any things that they would like to chat about? Ben? No, Heather? No, Commissioner Fox? Or,
Airport got pushed to later this month.
Okay.
It'll be after our next meeting, actually, so.
okay, so then, but anything else that you guys want to add to anything? All right, and so now we'll move to action items. We've got one action item, I see. Greg?
Good evening, commissioners. Just as a bit of a background, so part of the North Apron project required the mitigation of a wetland that existed in the location of the expansion. Part of that wetland mitigation, that whole project was regular monitoring for 5 years per the DSL permit. We failed the first year. And so without knowing the proper way to assess the invasive species versus the native species, staff hired on a small contract, Ecological Land Services, to help assess how can we move forward properly. And so they helped develop a revised mitigation plan, and also a regular communication with DSL, which also it benefited because DSL approved said planting plan. So what you have before you is a contract to, one, we were able to cook in the procurement of said plant species that are needed to replant the entire wetland. Also some oversight to assist, because the port facility staff is going to largely facilitate this implementation. But then also the first year monitoring and as-built reports and follow-on communication with DSL. For 23, not to exceed 23,800, we budgeted $30,000 for this project in the last budget. And so staff is recommending moving forward after we went through a small procurement, or I'm sorry, in intermediate, nope, it'd be small, under 150 procurement process. Ecological Land Services was largely seen by staff as the winning firm. And so staff is recommending moving forward with Ecological Land Services to perform this contract.
So. Don't take this personal. What happened the first time? And why didn't it work? And why do we think the second time is gonna work?
Great question. So first time, it's a kind of a convoluted event of the engineering services that was helping to oversee the entire project was not given the follow-on contract. So then you lost oversight from an engineering component. The staff personnel that was overseeing the project was no longer in place. So you lost institutional knowledge. The executive director that then had slightly oversight over that was no longer in place. So you lost that institutional knowledge. So there was time missed. Once new staff came on board, invasive species had invaded. And talking with the consulting firm, it's not that out of the normal that a proposed planting program would be installed, but those species just don't take for whatever reason. And talking with the guys in the field, we're at the airport, it's largely open, you've got a lot of wind, and so the opportunity for invasive species to blow in, infiltrate a newly planted area, it basically choked out the native species that were planted. So now with this new strategy, it's hardier, but also it's more of a shrub condition rather than trying to plant, I mean, it's trees that was scheduled previously, but they weren't given an opportunity to compete effectively with the invasive species. So in conjunction with the new planting, there's also a robust a maintenance program, which talking with facilities previously, they were under the impression it was hands-off. So there was a bit of miscommunication. There was just an unfortunate circumstance of events. And there was also a strategic implementation that didn't take. So this is a revision to that. And Mother Nature is going to do what Mother Nature does. And so this is our best approach to try to combat that. If after the first year monitoring, it's seen as not strategic, we might have to still plant additional species to combat that. The goal is after 5 years to have achieved a clean bill of health, if you will, where we are above the metric that we're held to by DSL for invasive versus native species.
I want to ask questions very specifically about that. You just threw out this number 5.
5-year monitoring starts at 0 this year. So they've given us a chance to reset the clock.
Okay, so in 1 year, DSL is going to want to say, how's the wetland going? That's going to keep happening for
Yes.
5 years.
We're not expected to be completely grade passing in year 1.
Okay,
But it was also seen as the invasive species were at such a level that we needed an aggressive approach to deal with that. And instead of cutting back the invasive species and hoping that the willows that were already choked out would come back online, talking to professionals in the environmental services, they felt that it was best to plant other species because why would you do the wrong thing twice?
and there's no,
Why wouldn't we want the clock to start last year instead of restarting?
Well,
Failed.
yeah, because we failed. We honestly,
We've already invested a
DSL
year in
dictated.
it.
DSL dictated that, and and as far as concessions for us being able to revise our planting strategy, our planting plan, they said, okay, well, we're gonna, since you're planting a new species, we're gonna start the clock again. So the port really didn't have leverage on that. That was dictated by DSL and USACE.
So simple mind, you got all these new plants that you put in. You got space between the plants. The wind's gonna blow. There's stuff gonna come in between the plants. What's gonna stop them from starting to grow again?
An aggressive maintenance strategy that wasn't implemented previously.
And how much is that
Facilities
gonna
go through
cost?
as weed whip, so all of these new plantings are gonna have cones, basically, to protect from being weed whipped, but essentially. We should have gone through and weed whipped throughout as a season, a couple of times during the season, just to keep the invasive species at bay, because it's pretty clear where the planted species are at. That wasn't done. It was again, miscommunication, and unfortunately, by the time we all came back to look at what we had, we needed to consider an aggressive strategy, which was the facility staff went out and they did a spectacular job of clearing it out now. We still have to come back per DSL and introduce more native species because a lot of those.
Okay, no, I get that, and I forget the number you said, but it was 20,000, 30,000, whatever it was.
Just under 24.
Yeah. Now, that gets you the plants replanted. How many times during the rest of the year are we gonna have to go through and basically weed whack the area?
Twice.
Is
Facility
that,
staff.
is that in the 26?
No, this is just an environmental firm.
Okay,
They
there
don't
is
come
my
out.
question. So in your budget that we talked about, Do you have that money in that budget, or do we need to go find that money to go do that?
As a capital expenditure, as a maintenance function. So it would be seen as a regular maintenance function after a while, because you're out there weed whipping and you're
Do
mowing.
you,
Would
do
be the
you have
worst question to get
sufficient?
Ryan answer.
I'm sorry?
Would
Yeah,
be the
it's-
worst
it's-
question to get Ryan to answer.
It's labor rather than a capital expenditure.
Is one of the native species that you guys are planting going to be an aggressive ground cover? Because that seems to choke out the.
Yeah,
best.
so it's actually more shrubs because the peripheral is a grass species, but down in the lowlands is where it really. The plantings, they were struggling difficult, canary reed grass at like 9 feet tall. So the thought is with these shrubs that are planted, they've already got a little bit of canopy. And coming back and weed whipping, it will choke out the invasive species. This is according to the environmental engineers that I've been communicating with.
I live in a wetland, so I know.
Yeah, the willows were just, it was.
Literally.
A single willow tied to a stick, and it didn't have any. It wasn't competitive, quite honestly, because you got the canary grass that just shot to the roof.
Yeah.
So shrubbery is seen to have a little more of an advantage in its peripheral, because it's gonna shade out some of that grass from getting the sun. And also, again, in conjunction with us getting out there with our team and weed whipping the invasives.
So my question is really for Ryan.
Right.
So
I've been-
will you take that as an action to?
Sure, I can follow. For it. 6 years I've been listening to this, same. Five at least, like six, same thing. I remember having these conversations years ago. I don't place any fault here because it's not, and I don't. This is all mistakes that were made a year ago, 2 years ago. I'm tired of listening to this. We need to get that done and get it done correctly and make sure we stay on top of it this time. And get that passing grade and be done with it. It is our responsibility, we need to do.
After the 5 years and we get a passing grade, then what? Then we don't have to look at it anymore.
That's correct.
Okay, so, okay. It looks like this could be a black hole for a while.
Yes,
This
so
could be some extra maintenance costs and Ryan might have to account for, Ryan, we'll have to get that from him and I said.
I mean, and one of the things that I personally know, because I literally live in a wetland, is after you whack the canary grass down. And I don't know if it would be allowable, like choking it out with orchard grass. Because orchard grass grows really quickly and it spreads and it doesn't grow very tall and it chokes out canary grass. But I don't know if that would be allowable.
I can double check. There was a planting schedule that was submitted to DSL that was approved.
Okay.
And so that's what we're gonna start with. I think if we see the need for alternative strategies, this is a moving target.
Yeah, because what's the size of that land? How big is it?
It's a couple acres. Off the top of my head, I don't have it committed.
Because weed whacking that seems
Football
really,
fields.
Yeah.
We can't.
It's all that low, it's all that low curve.
We're looking at this area right here.
okay,
And the facility staff, they took about a week and change. And this was when the grass was above head. So regularly getting after it, I don't think it would take as much. Again, I'm not Ryan, so I can't speak to that, but it's something that we will have to deal with for the next few years, whether we like it or not. It was part of our permit, it was part of the
To
project.
build the north ramp, right?
That's
Yeah.
correct. And so we're looking for ways to turn the ship back in the right direction.
okay. Anyone else have any questions or can I get a motion? So desired,
I'll make a motion to approve award of contract with Ecological Land Services for professional services for the airport wetland mitigation implementation not to exceed 23,800.
can I get a second?
Second.
Any discussion further? If not, all in favor?
Right.
I,
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Stay on top of that. Okay, with that. I know, I mean, I dealt with DSL for years, so I know.
And
Been
we-
proactive with DSL and they appreciate the transparency and the proactiveness.
Mhm. Okay, so, and then I have commission call, but I kind of already did that. Does anyone else have anything
Did
that
you
they want to
guys-
say?
Did you guys do the bridge committee resolution?
That was in as consent.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you moved it to action.
No,
Oh, okay.
we just talked about it.
Oh, okay.
So if any commissioner has anything else they'd like to add, I'm all ears. No, and if not, confirmation of commission directives to staff.
So we have, Ryan's gonna provide a maintenance schedule for the airport wetlands, the gearbox repair, press release. And continue with the scope of work for, the public relations, talking about the studies and, data collection. And budget.
Could you please look into, can airport money be used for
Oh, yeah.
public relations purposes?
So I'll tell you right now, because I've done a lot of research on the FAA grant obligations. And my understanding right now, and you feel free to confirm it, is that airport money can be used for other stuff, but it has to be proportional to what impacts the airport, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So, but I think that's what we'll discover.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else? If not, we do not have an executive session tonight, so I can adjourn this meeting at 6:32.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's go from this one.
They bang it along.
It's an apple.
You were making me laugh about the ropes that they were in this. And I'm like,
Yeah,
but they're
they're in
out on the
the
bridge, out in the open.
You know, though, after talking about
Whatever.
the species, these plants are probably more.
They're way more,
Put them in-
they're way more sensitive, I hope, than the ropes,
Well,
yes.
Until they're installed. They're in a bubble.
Are you guys aware of the Supreme Court decision, the SACA decision on wetlands? No. So the Supreme Court just made a decision, a ruling effective immediately, that changes the wetland, what is considered to be a protected wetland. What is a United States waters? And I basically, my first thought, I immediately started to look, did that get us out of this? But it doesn't, because Oregon DSL released a statement on June 5th that says, hey, second decision,
Yeah.
no,
Travis.
we still have, we're, you know, our DSL rules have priority in the state of Oregon. So you have to deal with us when you're permitting stuff.
Frankly, DSL might be